Yep.
All right. Welcome, guys, to another episode of the Mallcast. Another episode of the Mallcast. I'm one of your hosts, Pavan, aka Curry Maker, alongside with Ryan Alchemisto, Pirate Juan, as well as Zin Awesome. Today we've got a special uh, guest host, Greg, who is unfortunately not available tonight. So instead, we got Memo.
Yeah, and I had to do some movie magic to add Memo's name instead of Greg's because I forgot that we have a static image with the names. So we gotta
It's
get rid
beautiful.
of that for the future. Yeah.
God bless.
It's beautiful. So a quick update on what's been happening with a couple of us. We've been obviously, still involved. We've been trying to get ahead in terms of planning out episodes as well as topics. Gathering topic ideas. We have a list of topic ideas so that we can hopefully have a set schedule to kind of film or live stream on. On top of that, we have decided. Well, we haven't decided, but we extended an invitation to a couple of IT members to see if they wanted to do something, and you know what? They responded. So we have Isaac Shockwave, who wanted to start his own kind of podcast thing called the Resports Rundown. Essentially, it's going to be more of like an analytical slash sports news, like esports news kind of podcast slash show, which will be happening every other week, I believe.
Yeah.
So that we can kind of so that you guys don't have like a content drought whenever the Maldcast decides to not record because we're very busy, considering a few of us are graduating and we're dealing with classes and whatnot and molding in our various games. But yeah, speaking of molding in various games, I feel like this is a good segue. If it's a shitty segue, I'm okay with that. Is the topic today, which is pretty much adjusting to the meta. Adjusting to the meta being a very big thing that happens across all games. There's some games which don't have to like adjust to the meta or have a meta per se. But I feel like almost every game has some kind of meta. For example, Overwatch has gone through a bunch of metas. Takes a long ass time. CS briefly had a meta shift, which is pretty much like, hey, this gun's better than this one. Valorant obviously has its own metas with its agent pick, as well as a couple of other things like which loadout to use or which guns to buy. Phantom versus Vandal was a big one. The operator was a big one as well. So we're gonna dive right into that. I don't know. I feel like someone should define what a meta is.
I mean, I feel like most people know what it is, but generally it's just the strat that's just perceived as the most viable within like the current state of a game. So, for example, I know for Overwatch right now, Ball Diva is like what's considered to be the meta, and then you can obviously sub out the Diva and stuff, but that's generally what's considered to be the Diva. It's somewhat, well, meta. It's somewhat like a variation of Dive. I know for Valorant right now, I mean, the meta is kind of shifting just with the controller meta. I can't really speak on any other game though, so I can't say much. I'm not sure. Like League, I can't say anything. CS:GO, I'm sure CS:GO has overall stayed the same over a period of time.
Yeah, basically. I mean, League has changed a bit because there's a whole new item revamp
Yeah.
that happened over this season. And the fact that some champions are getting tweaked and adjusted so that they're seeing pro play finally again, like Udyr. Like everyone's happy that Udyr, basically the champion that only runs at you, is finally seeing pro play. Like over other champions that can like have CC or just more damage or bring more to the team.
And just like Aatrox, once he finally became viable in competitive play, he's gonna get reworked.
Yeah, I was gonna say I remember opening the League client yesterday and seeing that he won like the vote for the rework. So I was like, oh wow, that's
I think it's a
timely.
visual update though.
Oh,
No,
is it?
no,
It
they're trying to keep his theme intact, but they're also like giving him a VGU akin to Volibear Mundo, Aatrox, and all that. Fiddlesticks.
Sad.
I mean, to be fair, he was in desperate need of one. But also to be fair, there were like 3 champions I would say that could use a VGU that were on the list. I voted for Skarner personally.
I think I voted for Skarner too, actually.
I voted.
Yeah, I feel like Skarner does need a rework.
I forgot
Like-
that he's in the game.
They even straight up said, yes, Skarner needs the most help of everyone on this list.
Yeah, because this kid is kind of underwhelming, you know? It's really, like, don't get me wrong, it's still, I feel like his kid was strong, but because of the item changes and whatnot, I feel like his kid isn't like being optimized enough. And, like, I feel like there needs to be a rework so that his whole like abilities are more updated towards
Also
like
he's
new
like
champions and
the
stuff.
least. I think he's the least popular champion in League right now.
Yeah,
Don't
is
worry.
it only Captain Flowers that plays him?
Yes, but don't worry, he can still one-shot an 80 carry. So
Or he can
that-
still
that-
one
that-
shot.
that is the-
That's
that
never going to change.
That is the
That's
bare
how it's
bones
always gonna
requirement
be.
for any champion is can they one shot an AD carry? And if the answer is yes, then they are an actual champion. If not, well then they're just a minion in the lane.
Rip Ari.
no minions in the lane still. What do you? That,
Baron buffed Cannon minion.
yeah, they do more damage than 80 carries.
They
I
actually
think they
do.
more damage than 80 carry.
So has the meta changed away from having an actual AD carry like we saw a couple seasons ago, I guess? No?
It mostly depends on like the team, right? So right now in a lot of different regions, some teams are bringing out like Yone, like from previous seasons. Syndra's always been a staple in the bot lane. Mages like Seraphine's going 80 carry with another support, just so you can basically just play topside and basically have a free win because Seraphine's busted right now, at least in the higher elos. So there's definitely been a big shift, but nothing super like, oh yeah, we're just dropping a whole set of characters because these characters are better. It's more like subtle adjustments and changes to the items that basically caused this. Because before, like let's say you could buy Leandries and buy it with Ludens, right? Now you can't do that. So essentially, you either have to choose what your item build has to be. Oh, they have a lot of tanks, so I need a lot of damage over time. I need a lot of burn. I need healing reduction. So you can only get one mythic item, and you got to make it count, right? And it's usually the staple of the build. So those things have affected how people play champions, and subsequently like what champions are good, right? Because if you need to champion that scales, effectively it becomes a lot harder. Or if they get their mythic a second or something, very sketchy stuff. So those are just the points I see and how the item changes have changed the meta.
That's fair. I think. I don't know. I feel like just having AD carry be like one of the toughest roles mechanically already. Like those heroes are kind of mechanically tough. And then on top of that, saying like, "Hey, AD carries are too strong, so let's buff everyone else," kind of deal. Like, let's make everyone just as strong to have like the carry potential. I feel like it's a little unfair to people who are like really interested in playing like Vayne, Jhin, Ophelio, stuff like that. Mind you, most of the champions that have been released since 3-4 years ago, every new champion just has like a new gimmick, and that new gimmick is just busted as all hell. Like there's little counterplay that you can actually think of.
Yeah, but basically they just release champions that are like overtuned, and then they nerf
Like
them to
Kaisa?
become adjusted. Kaisa was never really that broken to begin with.
I don't know. When I was
She
playing,
had a high carry potential.
yeah,
I think that's how they do it, right? Like
No.
it's carry potential.
The one
They like
that,
evaluate a champion's carry potential.
the one that comes to mind to me is is Aphelios, mostly because that's when I really started following the game. But like he's like the one that comes in mind. It's like, ah yes, they released this character and he's just like mega busted.
Right. For me, I think it was Zoe because that's when I was like Ilaoi was out. Like I've been playing since after Elise was released, I believe, or Zed, and then I played like the patch after Zed got released, I think. And so when I started following the competitive scene and like got to college, it was like Zoe got released, and she was the most annoying goddamn character ever. Like straight up the most single-handedly the most annoying character ever. Purely because she had like a what is it, a 3 or 4 second stun that
Yeah,
has
like a sleep.
that sleep. Basically, it doesn't even have to hit you directly. If you walk over it, you get slept. So, like in the chaos of a team fight, she could sleep multiple targets at once and one-shot people, and like that pissed me off. Because like up till then, like a lot of mages could one-shot, but she just needed 2 abilities to land to one-shot. It sometimes she only needed to land that one nuke, right? She could just use her nuke, and then it'd be fine. She didn't even have to use any of the extra abilities. She didn't even need Ignite or Flash. She could just nuke people. And that was like really infuriating. I think at one point, I don't know if you guys have played like League before that, that patch or anything like that. But like back in the day, Nidalee was busted because the way you do it is Nidalee's spear had a crazy multiplier with distance. So they just chuck a spear and then start running away, and that's where like Nidalee top lane was really good, Nidalee mid lane was really good, and whatnot. Um, Zed obviously it was like assassins were just busted in mid lane. Um, Again, one shot potential, but they had to use a lot of like. I feel like that's the cycle they're doing is like assassins, then brawl, and like by brawl I mean like fighters. Either tank fighters or like or fighters in general, like Rengar or like assassin fighters that are like pretty beefy, but can one shot people, but cannot get one shot themselves. Into just like back to mage and then goes back to assassin. I feel like there's a cycle to the meta in League that like they constantly fall into.
Yep.
And like at one point it's like, oh, ADC's really good. I guess we'll have to buff assassins again. Oh, assassins are really good. I guess we need to have HP, like strong beefy tanks again. Oh, they're really good. Let's get mages again. Oh, mages are good. All right, we got to reduce their carry potential. Let's make ADCs good again. Like it's just like a constant cycle of that. But that's just my take on it, though.
I mean,
But like adjusting to it, especially when it's like a different class of characters, I found it tough. I don't know about you guys.
I mean, how do you really enjoy? I say this because even though I started playing the game a lot more recently, I still haven't like shifted from meta to meta. Honestly, I don't even know what meta is right now. But like, how do you really adjust in League, right? Because it's not like Overwatch where there's like a set like set amount of characters that are, or a set of specific characters that are meta for a certain period of time. I feel like in League it's more like the builds and the strategy, right? Or yeah, I guess it's the build and like the play style more than the compositions, right? Or at least that's what I would assume.
Yeah. So like, obviously each team would like pick like a busted hero, at some point, right? That's what I think, and then the playstyle shifts. But I think Juan's probably better at answering that.
I mean, essentially, it comes down to like, okay, Riot buffed this character, right? So the people that are really good at the game, it affects them a lot more because they can feel it, right? Eventually, it trickles down to like the average and skilled player base, and that's when like people are like, "Oh, this champion's busted," but it ends up becoming like not only is the champion a little bit better than the one they're playing, but the play style, how they're playing, the builds all benefit that person or that champ, right? So it's sort of a mix of like what Pavan and Asim were saying, where like, yes, of course they release Overtune champions or champions that have crazy carry potential or potential that like just do their job really well, right? So like Samira, she was a very mobile AD So before she got her healing nerfs or healing reduction nerfs on her ultimate, she'd do her job really well because she was very mobile, could get close, could stay alive, and could do damage. And then the items also helped her because there's a lot of lifesteal items in the meta that prompted her to just be able to sustain. So the people who could play her and had that playstyle to play aggressive and play with their team benefited the most, right? It's like if it all comes in together and you're really good at that type of playstyle and those champions, you're gonna perform way better than if you play like champion that's not meta or play something that is bad in lane, right? Even if you are better than the other person, because eventually the items make a difference, right? Or when you get those items makes a difference.
I guess really League as
But I
well
want to
is-
know.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, let me finish you.
Uh,
Finish what you were saying.
I was gonna say League is kind of one of those games where I mean, like fundamentals do matter, but I think more than that, it's more like I don't know if counter-stratting is the right word, but it's like I guess counter building or something like that is more important than actually like full-on fundamentals, right? Because I think the fundamentals in League you generally keep them from character to character, but the when you're adjusting to a meta, it's not about like relying too much on your fundamentals. It's more along the lines of understanding like what's the most viable builder strategy, right? So it's
Exactly.
yeah.
I want to know the Dota 2 take on this, because like Dota 2 and League, obviously in the same class of the same genre of games. It's like, how does Ryan? How does Dota 2 kind of change its meta, and how do you adjust to it?
I mean, I don't know if the meta has really changed for a few patches now. Like I guess in some ways it did. Patch 7.26, we dealt with what is the Dota equivalent of double barrier, which we call Zoom meta. It's honestly miserable to play in and play against. And what Zoom meta is like you pick heroes like Beastmaster, Enigma, Nature's Prophet, all these heroes that like to build Necronomicon, that like to just completely overwhelm the enemy team with all these summon units, and you just try to end the game as early as possible. And it it was very powerful in 7.26. A lot of it was because Beastmaster and Lycan were just really, really good, especially Lycan, and Necronomicon was also a very powerful pushing item. It was very good and efficient and cheap farming item, and it aided in the push a lot. And then they nerfed that item, and Zoom meta effectively died in 7.27, and now it's back because they made Lycan better. So like
Lucky.
metas kind of come and go. Like they're a lot more volatile. Like even throughout the same patch, because patches can start out like being one thing, in which in this case it's currently Zoom meta, but it's also a couple of other things too. Puck going like Puck going like attack builds with phase shift talent that allows it so whenever she uses it, she throws out like an attack on everybody nearby. Like that build's becoming more popular. Outworld Destroyer, who got renamed to that because it used to be Outworld Devourer.
Yeah,
He got reworked again because he's been a literal trash fire of a hero for quite a while, and he started out this patch as a literal trash fire, and then he got a couple of buffs, and now he's effectively taking over the meta and is being played in roles that he never used to be played before. In addition to mid lane, he's also being seeing play as a position 1, a hard carry, as an offlaner, and even as a roaming support, position 4, and he's been working in a lot of comps. But Lycan is still very strong again, but he also is very counterable because he doesn't scale that well, and heroes that can lock him down during his ultimate can deal with him. People don't know if it's going to stay like this for a while. Only time will tell. Like a lot of it is just like a waiting game to see like how people eventually adapt and shift their decision making process
So I guess
to deal with these things.
it is shifting in Dota kind of similar to the way it's done in League or no?
I mean, in some ways it is. Like what if, because a lot of the situations you deal with, like in the game, it's all. how do I put this? Decision making is probably like your ability to make good decisions or minimize bad decisions is what separates like the high level players from everyone else. But
Yeah.
sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, like often, because
I feel like it's kind of the same with
it
Overwatch.
is
Oh, sorry, go
it
ahead.
is the same between the two games,
Yeah.
but
I kind of feel like with Overwatch,
It's like part itemization, part like team composition,
because
and part like play style. But like
but
it's a faster, slow
in
pace
some ways
play style.
it's also different from Overwatch because Overwatch doesn't have that whole item dynamic. That
Yeah, that's true. But I guess the point I'm trying to get across is that like in Overwatch, like um a lot of times like when a meta shifts, a lot of people are caught off guard because the playstyle changes so much from meta to meta, right? Because if you consider like double barrier to what's meta right now, it's completely different. Double barrier was very spammy and like
Double barrier to poke was one of them, which was what they played at the end of the Overwatch League season. Basically, double off tank poke, so Roadhog, Sigma, Hanzo, Ash, like double sniper ish.
Oh.
With like a Zen Mercy, like that was very.
yeah.
That in itself is like each
that
character has its own sustain, but it was something else.
that's what I was like trying to get into while I was collecting my thoughts. Is that the meta shifts in Dota are a lot more gradual. It's like they happen just like slowly over time, and people just kind of ease into it. It's not like an Overwatch where you're just kind of thrusted into it, like come a new patch, and
Yeah.
then like people are just like, oh, now it's Baldiva. Oh fuck, now all of a sudden double barriers back. And then oh shit, what is this? Lucio is suddenly a good hero again, but is still actually very bad. But people are just forcing him to make him work.
Yep.
Yeah, which I feel like for Overwatch, like one of the key things when it comes to adjusting the meta isn't necessarily like uh it it has there's a lot of fundamentals you need to know, but it's not fundamentals in the sense of like I guess like your mechanics and stuff like that. It's more like one, your decision making, and two, like understanding what the purpose of like a specific composition is, right? And the people who like don't the people who spend a lot of time only learning a specific meta and then that meta changes are just like left behind, right? Because then like once like for example, triple tank was meta at some point, and that like within the same year or something, dive was meta, and they're both completely different. But the people who like stuck in like the ways of playing the triple meta, like if people were playing Ana like the way they were in triple tank meta, and then they try to play dive, they just were doing nothing because they didn't know how to play that.
Yeah, I think part of that is when it comes down to it for Overwatch specifically, it's not just knowing the micro stuff, so like your individual gameplay, but it's the macro stuff.
Yeah,
It's like the macro
exactly.
fundamentals. So like which ults are going to be thrown, you know, the map itself and what areas are kind of advantages in each map. Like certain maps, you have to make use of high ground. Certain maps, you don't have to make use of high ground. Certain maps you want to play on point. Certain maps you don't want to play on point. Like almost just leave most maps you kind of just want to leave the point, finish the fight, and then go back to point kind of deal. And like there's certain positions which are just better in the sense of they apply more pressure than it actually than being in a different position. So like for dive on certain maps, it'd be like a lot of people that came from like double shield or just after double shield, and like pretty much any time after goats, pretty much became they don't understand like the fundamentals of dive. And I say this because I don't either. I don't understand like the whole the complete fundamentals of dive, which is like the whole point of dive isn't to kill people, right? It isn't to take down the enemy team. It's to deny people space, and it's like something that we've been like we know, but like when it comes to applying it, it's a lot more difficult, right? Like there's only so much that you can be told because there's no absolutes in any given game. Like there just isn't absolutes.
something to note about like Overwatch 2 in particular is I feel like after like Goats' meta, every single meta after that has like required some level of coordination that did not exist like before Goats, right? Which I feel like isn't necessarily the case with other games. Like other games like obviously do require some sort of team coordination in whichever meta. But I feel like with Overwatch, like once Goats became meta, people like understood like, oh, if you're if you get this good at comboing certain abilities or like playing a certain composition in this way, you like you're just going to own, right? So like every
Yeah, you
meta,
can go to the moon.
yeah, exactly. Every meta after that, like even in ranked, requires some level of like it requires a pretty high level of coordination that like I feel like before Goats didn't, right? And so I think when it comes to adjusting the meta in Overwatch, the issue isn't just like your own individual gameplay. It also ends up revolving a lot around how you play around around your team, which
I mean,
I don't think is true for a lot of other games personally.
I mean that's just Overwatch as a game by design, though.
Yeah. Well,
Like
but
there's a much stronger emphasis on teamwork than there
yeah.
is on like individual play when it comes to winning.
Yeah, but what I'm saying though is that I feel like overall like it wasn't in previous metas like before Goats it wasn't so like ingrained into the meta that that was like so important when you're playing on ladder, right? But I feel like at this point, if even when you're playing on ladder, it's something that's like such a big part of like whichever meta it is now.
I mean, to be fair, before 222, how many people actually played meta? Like 90%,
That's
like
true. Yeah, no,
99% of player
Like
base
that's
in,
today
fair.
have
in
actually
most
played meta.
most cases, you'd have one tank if you were lucky, and like one support, but
Yeah,
the rest were just DPS. Like
that's
in
very
all
true.
honesty.
Like if you were not at like top 500, like 4.3k, and you said that you played goats like in ladder, you didn't play goats.
Hmm.
You didn't. Even if you think you did, you didn't.
Yeah, you were just spamming your abilities and running at people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like in it's also like a team thing, right? Like in teams, if you didn't play in a team environment and just like off of ladder experience and you thought you played goats, you didn't,
Hmm.
because the level of coordination that a team has, like for tournaments and whatnot, like top like tier 2, tier 3, collegiate stuff like that, like the coordination required to run like a very efficient like goats comp um is crazy. It's also very chaotic, right? Like a lot of people are like, oh my god, there's so much like Memo here experienced goats for like the first time, and he was like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. And that's exactly what it is, right? Like I think after goats it kind of slowed down the game a lot. It went from like a fast-paced chaotic kind of gameplay to a very slow, stagnant, high sustain, um, decently high damage. You'd be playing around like certain key abilities like Baptiste Immortality Field. You'd pretty much be playing around like Baptiste and Orisa and like shields in general. So it was like very high sustain, very kind of slow. So like you'd see the games get dragged on for longer and longer, purely because like it was pretty much a battle of attrition compared to the chaos that was goats, right? Like there was
The thing
still a
is,
lot of sustain, but it was a different kind of sustain. It
okay,
was like
I
fight, 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 as soon as, and then disengage, and then next fight, everybody has ults. Throw ults, try to live through ults. If you lose, if you stack an ult, you pretty much lost the fight.
It was like whoever won the ultimate battle at the end of Goats was like the winner of the fight, and that's like that was like so chaotic to me. Versus like now, it's just like, oh, you can get like a pick or two as a
see
Hanzo or a Kree, and then you can move in
the
and win
thing
the point or something.
the thing about goats is that it I feel like the way that like you're putting it right now is like way too oversimplifying it, right? Because the thing with goats is that it's actually not very chaotic. It's more rigid than a lot of other metas. It's just that a lot of it requires you to be so like aggressive is is probably like the right word for it, but it requires you to be so decisive in what you're doing, and a lot of it
Yeah,
plays.
like you have to call the right target at the
Yeah,
right time, knowing what
yeah.
like stuff there is. Yeah, I get that,
You had to be
but like I
decisive.
was just oversimplifying it.
Yeah,
Like
You also have to
simplifying
be
it.
you have to be like very patient. I feel like as
yeah.
well
You had to be yeah exactly. There's
because
a
the
lot of
fights are very long.
there's a lot there. This is what I'm about to say is also kind of simplifying it, but there's a lot of like there's a lot of nuance to goats, but there's also a lot of like like flowchart thinking that comes into it too. But you also have to adapt to like various situations, you know.
Yeah, but that's been every meta though. Like,
Yeah, but I think
it's like we're adapting to the situation. It's just like
Yeah,
I
'cause-
feel like the change, the pace of each of them was kind of different, right? Like goats when you watch or like when you're taking part in it, very chaotic. It's rigid, but it's still chaotic.
Yeah.
Compared to Double Shield, which was still rigid, mind you, but it wasn't as chaotic. Where it'd be like people like two groups of 6 clashing into each other, right? Like it'd be, I'm at one end of the map, you're at the other end of the map. Let's see who shield dies first. Push up. Let's see who shield dies next. Push up. Like that kind of thing. It was very methodical in the sense of the movement compared to Goats, which was we're gonna engage at this point, whoever wins kind of deal. And like they're game changing plays, game changing ultimates, whatnot, right? Like fight changing ultimates. Like you could flip a fight with just like a really good diva bomb. You could flip a fight with a really well timed rally. When Brig was busted, you could just shield bash shatter. Like shit like that was very kind of important. And like timing that as well. Like if you shield bashed a Reinhardt who just got bubbled, like you just wasted your shot. Like you now have to wait for an additional 5-6 seconds for your shield bash to come up. At which point they could just shatter at any point, and at that point you guys would be like backing up. So it's like it's I think for Goats it's seizing the opportunity in the smallest, in decently small windows compared to Double Shield, which was seizing the opportunity in larger windows and like at a larger scale.
Well,
So like
also,
when an opportunity is available.
Well, also with Double Shield, it kind of also required you to like wait until someone else on your team like made a play, and then you would have to capitalize on that, right? Like very early, Double Shield was like very revolved around like Mei or Doomfist getting like a good wall, or Doomfist getting a good kill, or a good kill early on, right? And so like in that sense, like Double Shield was like we were talking about how Goats is patient. Like Double Shield also required a lot of patience, but a lot of it wasn't really relied. Like it wasn't as much as like everyone trying to do the same thing. It was like you were waiting for one person to do like the thing that's absolutely required of them, and then capitalizing off of that.
Yeah.
You have to wait for like an opener.
Yeah, essentially. It was really.
But like a bigger throwback though is the dive meta. Like so there's like there've been like dive kind of evolved because there was like classic dive. There was what I like me and a couple of others call like boomer dive, which was like Zen Lucio, Winston Diva, and you have like Genji Tracer, right? And then you have the current dive, which is like Ball Diva, Sombra Tracer, or Sombra Echo.
You should also add. You should also add for Boomer Dive
Zen
that Zen eventually got replaced by Mercy. When
yeah.
You mean Lucio?
No, Lucio got replaced by Mercy.
Lucio got replaced.
Yeah,
right.
so that's Moth meta.
Yeah.
Was this like
So that's
super
like
early?
That was still dive.
Yeah, that was still dive. Like multiple iterations of dive, right? Like it's just like whichever character is really strong at engaging, and like you basically revolve around that. Like back and like knowing how to play that fundamentally, or understanding that type fundamentally. So if you played like Boomer Dive, which was like the Zen Lucio, pretty much if you came into this meta, you'd be like, this is not that big of a deal. Like I don't mind getting dove on by 5 different people, you know? Like I'll maybe I can get a pick, but like I know that my team is not going to be like feeding. But like there's obviously like a knowledge gap and a game knowledge and game sense gap, which stems from people not playing the game back then compared to now. Also, you know, characters have been buffed, nerfed, changed all around. And like with this current dive, I guess, with the ball, it's like ball's highly mobile, has a decent amount of sustain, and then you have Brig, which is to just counter just a little bit. It's not even like because when Brig originally got released, dive just died because she had a really low cooldowns. She was extremely strong and whatnot. But I feel like I'm waffling on Overwatch a lot, but like that essentially is what I'm thinking is like, you know, that is chaotic. It's still planned. It's like organized chaos, and then patient chaos, and then this one's just like patience then turns into chaos. Like you'd wait for the smallest of windows, or like a window of opportunity, which was usually a pick, and then like it moved to a poke comp, which was whoever shield got down, and then you play off Roadhog picks or sniper pick or Zenyatta pick, and the Mercy would just be flying around healing everybody. You know, if someone did get picked, you'd have to like cover for them so the Mercy could res. And then like now it's slowly shifting towards like more of a dive centric kind of thing. So like people who didn't get to experience classic dive or previous iterations of dive now get to, but it's a different kind of dive already because of new characters being involved.
All right, let's talk about a game on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah,
one that has like
yeah.
no meta shifts whatsoever. Well, I shouldn't say whatsoever, but for the most part, I feel like CS:GO. Yeah, I mean CS:GO only has like there was the what do you call it? The Krieg. Actually, it was the AUG that became
Yeah, the
a little
AUG.
bit, and then it was the Krieg, and then they nerfed both. But I think that's really it, right? Like the game.
Well,
Was there
it's
an
like-
op meta? I feel like there was a point where like op
Very
got
early on.
yeah, like,
nerfed,
like-
and then
very
everyone
early.
raged.
very early.
like
everyone
2013.
flipped.
2013, like Kenny S was so overpowered because you could like you could be scoped in and move like basically the same speed as if you weren't. And now like when you scope in, you're like a turtle, you move slow.
Yeah.
But like the other metas in CS that have changed have mostly been influenced by Astralis. Because like before metas in CS were like guns, you know, it's just this gun got buffed, this gun got nerfed. And then Astralis came around and was like, hey, what if we just like invent like tactics? Like, what if we just invent like, hey, we throw these smokes, we flash for each other, and just have very, very good teamwork and very organized takes. And because before it used to just be like, okay, let's run a default, and whoever runs the better default wins. There was not that many like tactics like now there is like, oh, let me throw a pop flash for you, let's clear here. Like Astralis is very good on CT side, taking a lot of information from and space from the T side by pushing down, having aggressive lurks, and like old CS, we never really saw that. And Astralis really like pushed the meta towards like aggressive CT sides, but also like staying safe and always having it out.
I think another thing about Astralis too, this doesn't really apply to like the just like the ladder, right? Like just your rankings, but it kind of applies more to the pro meta. But I feel like Astralis is one of those teams that also just like changed up the map meta, right? Because how many teams were playing like Nuke or Vertigo before Astralis just started like picking it as a pocket pick, and then we were like, well, I guess teams were just like, well, I guess we gotta learn how to play this now, 'cause otherwise Astralis is just gonna pull this up on us, and we're gonna just lose a free map for them.
But to be fair, like Cobblestone used to be in the rotation, and then they added Vertigo.
Yeah.
It's just that Astralis jumped onto Vertigo faster than anyone else.
Yeah, that's true.
And they came up with more strats. But like early phase was actually really good at Nuke. Like they were like the best. I think they won like 8 pistol rounds in a row without losing on Nuke, and they won like every single Nuke map before Astralis became more dominant.
Yeah, and I feel like some of it with like adjusting to the meta and whatnot, like that for CS or tactical shooters specifically, it's not just like the gun, but it's also like you said, it's every other aspect. So like when to buy, when to save.
Strategy.
Yeah, like the strategic
yeah.
aspects as well
The
as like
economics,
utility,
yeah,
right? Like I feel like classic CS. Correct me if I'm wrong though, but like classic CS didn't make that great of a use of utility, right? Like that Astralis uses now with like set smokes and like smokes, flashes, and Molotovs compared to way back before like Astralis kind of changed it up.
Yeah, like a very good example of utility usage is Astralis does a lot of nade stacks. Like nade stacks weren't like a new thing, but like Astralis like would throw them late rounds, like where they know there somebody is. They would like purposely save their nades instead of just like on Inferno just running it down banana and throwing your nades right off the bat, like a lot of comp teams do, like just in your normal face it matches or whatever. Like Astralis would hold on to their nades, bounce them off sky height or walls, skyboxes, and then like get a free pick or maybe even sometimes two, and just like really do a lot of utility damage before the CTs or Ts even saw each other. Like Astralis really brought that into like, hey, maybe you should actually save your nade instead of throwing it right after round. and do something with it a little bit more mid rounds, so you have an advantage.
The developers also kind of control the meta in CS because when they do map changes or like fix up a map, it affects how the map is played effectively. And it goes back to like becomes a top down thing where like they change it for the pros, and then the pros are the ones that can actually push it to the limit, and then everyone else starts applying that knowledge, right? Or sometimes it's just super obvious where it's like these changes are very obvious and they're needed for the map, right? I'm not
Like
gonna use
Dust 2 changes, right?
like the doors
Yeah.
changes on Dust 2.
I
Those
hate Dustin.
yeah, basically the
Same.
Dust 2 really hasn't changed. I think the card change also affected it before
The what?
when it was like the car, like when the windows and all that stuff
Oh,
actually
yeah.
break. That was also like, or when they didn't break, I think. But then going back to Valorant, it's like when they change a map, like they've changed split so many times because they realized the mistakes of the map and how it was being abused in pro play.
There was way too many
Uh,
50-50 angles on split.
There's too many on most of the maps in Valorant, but I think Split got the right treatment, honestly. But anyway, you were saying one.
that was it basically. Like the meta then becomes, oh, this map was changed. We gotta learn it again. It's good enough now, or it's better now that teams are willing to play it more or willing to put more time into getting better at it.
Yeah, I guess like one of the things with CS that I've noticed from the developers is like it's not necessarily that they're like tweaking the numbers for like certain things as much, but they're kind of just like I want to say they're changing the strategy, but changing the strategy also isn't completely true because a lot of the CS fundamentals have stayed the same over such a long time that like you generally when you're watching CS:GO, it's like you can kind of understand how like certain rounds will play out like very early on, right? Or just going off information that you've already gathered. But I guess my point is that like when Valve changes stuff, they're not looking to change like the very fundamental aspects or like very they're not the fundamental aspects or like numbers, but they're more trying to change like how like what type of strategies you can actually do on like whatever map, you know?
Yeah, but then, in the same genre, I kind of want to move away from CS and talk about Valorant because it's like a new game still, like it's compared to CS, like in terms of technical shooter genre, it being a new game. Like, how has the meta changed from like beta to post beta to like now, like Act 1 and then now like the most recent act?
So if you talk about like pugs or rank games, like obviously there's been changes,
Rank
but
games, rank
yeah,
games to start off with, then we can move up to like the pros
yeah.
and tier 2, tier 1, maybe even collegiate.
So personally I feel like the character balance in Valorant is actually like really good. And so what happens a lot of times is that there's not really a set meta in ranked, right? I think a lot of times you can generally run whichever character you want as long as you're not like putting too many eggs into one basket, such as like we're running 4 duelists, right? Like
Five
obviously,
even.
yeah,
5 duelists, dude.
yeah,
That's the
like
meta.
obviously that's not going to be an issue, right? The general what I consider the default composition, um, is like 2 duelists, one smoke, one initiator, which could be replaced with a sage sometimes, um, and then one sentinel, right? Like that's what default competent in Valorant is. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like if you run like before Omen was obviously the go-to pick, but it's not like you were throwing if you ran Brim, right? Like you can still run Brim fine. It's just that Omen was obviously the better pick. And in pro play, it's a very different case. Like if you weren't running Omen, you were doing something wrong. But in terms of rank, like it wasn't really a big issue. And so a lot of times you didn't see like people adjusting the meta for due to character. It was more so like the it would be how like what weapons you would buy like at a specific time or what utility would be used or like what utility would be like combo together because very early on Shorty was like a very very good option for pistol,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then they nerfed that,
Yeah.
and then everyone
Especially
realized,
on Haven.
yeah, and then they nerfed that and everyone realized, oh wow, the classic right click is actually insane, and it still is kind of insane, but
Jump
the
right click,
yeah
by the way.
yeah, and
Jump right
It's
click.
not as good.
Yeah, it's not as good, but it's still pretty. It could still be pretty insane if you're not spamming it.
It's like luck based now, like
Yeah,
actually luck based.
yeah,
Before you just and then they're dead.
yeah. And then the whole pistol meta game revolved right around the classic right click, and now it kind of feels it, like the classic still has a place, but I feel like the frenzy is like getting a lot more love now. It's like opened up like people to experiment with like more weapons, and it's kind of weird to it's kind of funny to me that like this whole time the ghost has been like a somewhat viable option, but there has never been like a ghost meta, even though it's like a pretty strong. I feel like it's a pretty strong pistol overall. It's just that the other options are like cheaper, and like if you sometimes get lucky with it, or if you just like put into the right position, it just get like nets you more value. You know?
Well, it's like the frenzy right now. It's
Yeah.
becoming meta on pistol round
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
because it's 400 and then light armor is also 400.
Yeah.
And running around, being able to run and gun with a gun that can shoot 13 bullets like pretty fast, like a CZ in CS,
Hmm.
is really OP
You win.
because you just run around a corner and if you hit the first dink, then all you need is 2 body shots max, at least one more if they don't have any armor, and they're dead. And it's like all the maps are super close quarters. Like
Yeah.
there's not a lot of long range battles. Maybe like on B and A long on like Bind or Haven,
In the mid.
but like otherwise, like you can always just play short angles as a defense or an offense,
Also,
and
oh,
the
sorry.
frenzy just becomes super viable right there because of the
Also,
spam potential.
not to mention like the way that like especially I feel like you can especially see it right now, but it also changes like the buy strategy, the buy like metagame a little,
Oh yeah,
because like I feel like now you see a lot of people forcing second round even if they lost pistol, because
yeah.
frenzy and stinger are just that good, right? Like
And um before people would only really force second round if they got bomb plant,
mhm,
but now people are just buying up stinger and light armor or sometimes even heavy armor if they got a kill
yeah,
and got the bomb plant down, or even without it they could still get like full armor and stinger, and
yeah,
it's super effective because of run and gun.
yeah,
And the recent update changed run and gun from
but that's only
rifles, but it kept the same for SMGs. So it's
yeah.
like I think personally, running gunning SMG should be a little bit more spread because right now, like it should be good close quarters, but like medium to long range shouldn't be as effective as it is right now.
I think another thing too, like the stinger in particular, is pretty like for $1,000, it's way too good, right?
Hmm.
I think the issue isn't, at least for me personally, the issue isn't how good it is with running gun, because I think SMGs in general, like have some variance of or some degree of reliability when it comes to running gun. It's just that the Stinger shreds like for $1,000, and you can run and gun with it. It's pretty insane.
I mean, but before this, it was like what op meta, pretty much. Like you'd have Jet on ops because of.
I mean, you still do. I think. Oh,
But now it's like in later rounds. It's not like it's only if you
yeah.
do have the advantage. Like you wouldn't force buy an op, right? Because of how strong it was.
And also
Because of
OT
the money as well.
and OT, like you never almost never see the op unless it's like Wardell because the op literally takes all your money versus before where you could get op and some utility or light armor.
Mhm.
Like the op being nerfed or being like price changed and nerfed really took it out of like comp meta because it wasn't that useful unless you're playing Jet and maybe now Euro because he has a little TP, but I really don't really see the op in comp unless if it's like a cracked Jet or something. But even
Yeah.
then, there's a lot of counterplay to it now. Now with more smokes,
Yeah.
more flashes in the game.
I think also something to note about Valorant is that because the game is so new, like a lot of the stuff that ends up becoming meta isn't necessarily because something got buffed or nerfed. It's just people understanding like, oh, this is actually very good in this situation, right? Because it's not like the
Mm-hmm.
Stinger got a buff. It's just that people didn't really use the Stinger that much because they undervalued it because they were like, oh, the Spectre is like 1600. It's obviously going to be more like powerful SMG, and then people like use the Stinger more and more, and they're like, wow, this thing is actually crazy. And so they're like, okay,
Yeah,
yeah, the Stinger is like the more viable solution, not viable, but like, just a very
a better
reliable solution.
choice.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
it's like when they buffed Jet, and then everybody started playing Jet, and then they were like, "Wait a minute, she was always like good.
Yeah,
Why did we
yeah,
never play Jet?"
yeah,
And then they nerfed her again, and then she's basically back to where she was like in beta. I'd say kind of like around
Yeah.
there, and now especially with the smoke change, she's basically at beta level, and like
She's
Jet's
OG.
still a very good option,
Yeah.
especially with a Judge too. Like Judge Jet, before they nerfed the Judge accuracy in air while you're gliding,
That shit was
Judge
insane.
Jet was literally like so stupid. Like
Yeah.
personally, I had to
right.
change. Personally, I had to change my sense like up by 0.1 because like it was I didn't have enough mouse space to look straight up to shoot the jet.
This is
So,
where
like
all
that's
the
how
over-
that's how I
This is
adapted.
where all the
Like just
Overwatch
changing my
players
sense.
shined.
Yeah.
All the Overwatch players would be like in the air, like going, "Oh God, I can see everything."
Yeah.
And all the CS
imagine.
players, all the CS players are like, "Oh my God, I don't know how to look up. I can only look left."
Unless they play Nuke, right?
I
So
think
it's
Yeah,
like,
I think
Nuke or
another
Vertigo.
I
Yeah.
think another instance to note too is actually there's two. One is Sage and one is Viper because Viper not as much in ranked, but definitely in pro play. Like Viper is becoming a lot more meta, but it like Sage on the other hand is like being run a lot, and it's not necessarily because they buffed her. They did give her like a small buff, which was that her wall doesn't decay health over time anymore. But other than that, they didn't really change a lot. I just think people are starting to understand like, oh yeah, like Sage is actually really good at one getting off angles, two holding a certain area, or three just like making it really hard for people to escape certain spots, and you just put utility there to kill them or force them out, or you just
Mhm.
swing on them and they literally stuck because they're slowed. Um, and I like again, that's just another instance where people are just like start playing a different play style and understanding like, oh, she's actually very good in this situation. We just weren't using her properly before. Which
Yeah.
I had to say like the developers for Valorant like they kind of said something along this line when Sage initially got nerfed, where they were like, oh, like everyone was like, oh, Sage is like so bad now, like she's so useless, and the developers are like, no, like she's still fine, like she's still really good, and a lot of people like called them like called out bullshit on that, but I think a lot like I don't know, I feel like you can't really say this a lot about a lot of other devs, but I think the Valorant devs are actually like they generally have a
Playing
very
the
good
game.
yeah they
The,
have
the over
sorry
the,
go ahead.
the Overwatch devs are like this too, where they always bring into the conversation like what is actually meta versus the perception of what players think is meta.
Hmm.
But I guess what my point is that like the the Riot devs are very often like on the nose when it comes to stuff in Valorant. I feel because they said the same thing about Jet before she was like they said the same thing about Jet where they were like, yeah, like we don't think Jet is as underpowered as you people are saying, and then what do you call it, like she gets buffed and everyone's like, oh, she's incredible, and then
Or like Raze.
oh yeah, I mean, although
Oh my God, Ray's
to be fair,
infuriating me.
Raze was overpowered, and they kind of admitted fault on that one. But yeah,
Yeah, on release, Ray's was just like a
yeah,
crazy
Bro,
nuke.
I forgot she had two nades to start off with.
Yeah, she had two nades to start off with. So
I
even if you
I
did like,
didn't I didn't start playing Raze, and now I'm a
And-
Raze main, but like I didn't
and-
start playing Raze until they nerfed her.
bro,
And Antos were $100 cheaper.
yeah.
yeah,
And they
Yeah.
also did like a lot more damage, and the damage was a lot
Yeah,
more
it
full
used to do
range.
75. I used to
Yeah.
play when she had 75, and then now they nerfed it at 50, and now it's 25 unless if you let it sit there for a while.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
like back to Sage, like real quick,
Mhm.
like the problem was that people were using her way too aggressively, and that's not what Riot wanted from her. They wanted her to be like more of like a passive support player that can really set up the team with her slows and
Yeah.
not like take a ton of space with her wall and slows. Like and split. The biggest thing was to like throw your slows on both sides of mid, and then put up your wall up down one of the sides, so your team can swing on one side and take an
Yeah.
easy fight and a fast duel. That's not what they wanted. They wanted her to be like, okay, let's put up the wall up mid just to like block information and block time or whatever, or like save the wall so you can use it at a post plant or during a take. Like
Which
it should have never been aggressive.
yeah, which if you kind of think about it, like the way that they've designed the Sentinel role is to be like, like hold down an area and like slow things down, and it's kind of weird. Like personally, I consider there to only be two Sentinels in the game, and that's Cypher and Killjoy, right?
Killjoy.
Yeah. When I see Sage, I actually feel like she's either played at more towards like an initiator or a duelist, where she's more like setting up the team for success.
Mhm.
You know, well, I say a duelist, but the duelist is literally
Yeah,
only in the pro meta. But like I would say like more in like ranked and stuff. Like she's a lot she played a lot like an initiator, where she's just meant to set up the team.
yeah. I feel like the slows for Sage was like meant to slow down like a fast push, right? Like let's say if someone did get picked off early or get like got wide swung on and whatnot, like let's say on Haven, someone peeked C long and got picked off, like they could use the slow or the wall to kind of slow their push, so that like the rest of your team can rotate, and by the time that rotation happens, like even if they're still pushing up, they'll just push through. But it slowed them a little bit so that your team has a chance, right, at a retake. I feel like Sage is pretty good at retakes.
Yeah, but
Generally,
I think generally though, like that is like a playstyle of Sage that exists, but I don't think
But you never have util for it.
yeah, I
So
don't
yeah,
you
it's
never have
because
it.
it's kind of
Unless
expensive.
like
Like-
you wall you want basically what you said. There's no
It's like a
mud.
good Sage player will always have util for later rounds, and a bad Sage player will just expense her Qs and walls up real fast.
yeah, I think you get a lot more value from a util from actually not like trying to clog an area, you know, because
Mm.
it just the issue is that like wall, for example, like you can use it to close off like so many angles, or just set yourself up on like an off angle, rather than just like, what do you call it, just like, yes, you can no longer come in here anymore, this is my land, you are not allowed in. And
And then it
like,
gets shot down.
yeah, exactly, like that use of wall like isn't that useful anymore, especially because they made it so that when you place wall, it's like half health for the first 3 seconds, right? So people
Yeah.
just destroy it in those instances. And so I don't know, it's just weird, like I don't understand why she's still defined as a sentinel, because I feel like she does not have a lot of sentinel like aspects anymore. I don't think she runs as like a solo sentinel anymore. When people run Sage, they usually run the Cypher or the Killjoy. They don't run a Sage as like the only person. I also that also has a lot to do with the fact that Sage herself doesn't have a lot of info gathering ability like the other sentinels do. So like
yeah,
it just that there's also that aspect of it, but that's just how I see it.
Well, the way I've always seen it is like sentinels are supposed to be like hard stoppers of a
Mhm.
site. So like ciphers, cages can hard stop you. Like, or it's not even like a hard stop. It's just like
Slow
getting
down.
info and like
Yeah.
slowing down.
Yeah.
So like getting information has never really been like a specific role, because like for example Sky can get information, but she's
Yeah.
not a sentinel.
Sky,
Like
Sova.
she throws her flash out and it'll tell you if somebody got flashed or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Sova also, yeah. You can also do like creative stuff with like Jet and Raze, like you could use a satchel to look over like a wall, be like, oh hey,
Yeah.
there's like 4 people right next to me, any help? Or like you could use a Jet Q. Like a lot
Exactly.
of characters can get information. It's just some are better at it, and it's not specific to any role. But like Sentinels are specific to like stopping a push or stopping a lurk,
Yeah,
like
it's just that
having control.
it's just that they also have the
Mm.
added benefit, like Cypher and Killjoy have the added benefit of gathering information that Sage doesn't have. So
Mhm.
it's more along the lines of like, if you run Sage as your solo sentinel, you're giving up the information aspect of it, unless you're running like a Sova or Sky for that matter. But like at that point, is it really worth it? Because I just feel like you're
I
just.
think I think Sage Sky will be new meta.
I mean, a lot of Sky has been played in EU for this past like week and.
yeah. That's what I was gonna ask next. Or kind of like push the conversation away from like ladder towards like the pro meta,
Mhm.
because like how Astralis did the change the pro meta in CS in terms of tactics and whatnot. I feel like teams have done the same thing. Mainly because it's like a new game, obviously, right? Like
Right.
there's so much to be explored. So like Sub Rosa on Phoenix, or like Hazed on Phoenix. I think, is it Hazed?
No, it's not his. It's Drone or Sabrosa.
Yeah. So drone on Phoenix. Like the pop flashes through smoke against like Brim, Omen. When like a team ran Brim and Omen, Brim, Omen, Sage or whatnot, like pop flashes through there, so that they could get a like quick swing, using like making up temporary, losing it as temporary cover, and then like using Phantom instead of Vandal because there's tracers, right? Like Vandal, you can see where the bullet's coming from. Phantom, you cannot. Like Vandal's so strong, right? Like you can one shot, headshot, but like Phantom's like a safer option.
So it's more reliable.
Yeah, and more reliable when it came to like playing into smokes, and like how Sentinels, like Team Sentinels, like how Shazam ran Breach, and like I don't think that many teams kind of ran Breach as well as he did.
Well, the thing with
Or like utilized Breach to its maximum.
the thing with Breach is that a lot of NA teams like didn't and really still don't use Breach as much as like other regions do because they rely a lot more on the Sova. It's kind of weird. Like a lot of other regions, like they think that Sova is good, but they think that like Breach is just the better initiator, right? And sometimes you have two initiator comps, but like if they had to choose between one or the other, they would usually go for Breach in other regions. But NA has always stuck closer to running Sova, right? And I think it's just because a lot of times like Sova is good at getting information, but it's not that he isn't amazing at setting up like executes, right? Sova is really good when you're running like uh I guess more of a default style because you get the information and you're able to play off that. It doesn't it adds something to an execute, but not as much as like a Breach or a Sky does, right? And so at least in NA executes like are obviously they're gonna be part of any pro meta, but NA like runs very like default heavy and more like like puggy is really I hate that term, but it kind of is what it is. Like NA is a little more puggy, but like other regions on the other hand, they rely a lot on utility and therefore they rely a lot on executes. And so a character like Breach or Sky just adds so much to your execution ability that Breach is run a lot more in other regions compared to NA.
Yeah, I think that's valid, but also with like addition of new maps, obviously Riot's going to be releasing more maps in the future, adding more agents. Like they did say that they were going to add like an agent every not every act, but like every what is it called?
Well, no, it is every act. No, a new agent.
Oh, it is every act.
Oh
yeah.
A new agent every act, a new map every episode. But they said that they're increasing the rate of map production, so now it's going to be right the act before a new episode is going to be when a new map comes out. So it's slightly earlier than before. I guess it's technically the same rate, it's just slightly earlier.
Yeah, because we're now in episode 2, right? Or are we in act 2?
No, episode 2.
Episode 2, act 1.
Yeah.
Okay. So like Ascent was the sorry, Icebox was the new one, wasn't it?
Yeah. Which
new map.
Yeah, and kind of going back to like the pro meta thing, I actually feel like Icebox hasn't changed a lot in like the ranked meta just because there has been enough like pro play to educate people how to play on it.
Also, a lot of people don't like playing it to begin with.
Yeah,
they'll just dodge.
Yeah, that's true. But like
Icebox Paris of Valorant.
Yeah.
Well,
at least for now. But like I think once people understand like how to play it, they'll like come around to it. But essentially like it was very clear at the beginning like not a lot of teams knew how to run Icebox, right? Especially in NA because they're all doing the same thing. They're going everyone go A, and we just execute A, and sometimes we're just gonna have someone lurk mid, and we'll still execute A, and maybe we'll throw B in there from time to time, but that's what it was in NA a lot. And this past week, like in EU, we saw a lot of the EU actually, I think like 4 out of 8 of the EU teams and all top 4 EU teams ran Viper on, or what do you call it? Ran Viper on Icebox, yeah, because the way that Icebox works is that there's a lot of angles in it, right? And the Viper wall is actually so good at compartmentalizing the map into like specific angles just because the way that the map is that like a lot of the angles are parallel to each other, right? So like when you have the Viper wall, you're able to close multiple at the same time, and it just you're able to you're playing a map editor, right? Like that's what you're doing. Like
you're able to simplify the map and take control.
You can like cut off the mid
instead of like trying complex strategies.
Yeah.
Like on defense, you can just cut off like a whole like full sight line.
Yeah.
From multiple angles compared to.
and then
like Phoenix or something like that, who
yeah.
just like a temporary wall, or like Sage, who isn't necessarily the best.
Well, no,
But like I feel like Smokes are still pretty good there.
I mean, yeah, but I think Icebox is kind of like unique because on other maps in the game, like at least when it comes to running Viper, which isn't like that common, but it's like Viper on other maps in the game is kind of good as like a secondary smoke character, right? Like if you're running Viper on like Bind, you still probably want to have a Brim or Omen. But when it comes to Icebox, because because of the way the map is designed, you're able to close off so many angles at once that you can actually get away with using her as the single smoke. But what you see a lot of times is that people run the Sage at the same time too, because the Sage also has a wall, and also not to mention that wall is like insanely annoying on on defense because you just wall off tube and no one can go kitchen anymore. So like like you're just cutting off a whole area of the map because it's just not worth the time. Like, by the time you break all the walls, like the enemy team can just take so much space on the map.
And you could big brain fake placing the wall and then walk through it yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
My favorite play.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers all the games that we play. Obviously, there's a bunch of other games that we haven't covered. Like,
What about Rocket League?
I feel like I didn't do mine justice enough.
The Rocket League meta is directly proportionate to how good you are as a player.
Well, before, like, there was never that double bounce in the air. Like, if you could reset on the ball.
But it was directly proportional to how good the player base was.
That is true. But once they changed that, the meta in air dribbling changed huge time.
I mean,
Anyway.
yes, but then again, it's like there's
directly proportional.
There's solos in Rocket League.
No, I know.
Threes, like obviously in threes. I mean, you guys, we're going into this now. We're going into this. All
right, pop off, dude. Pop off.
Basically, like who can pass better and who can rotate better. That's basically the meta, but it ends up being a tiebreaker of who's better mechanically or who can read the play better, right? Like as people get better, the meta changes because then people are able to musty flick, flip reset, aerial dribble, fakes get better, people get faster at it, so it just causes a like metas for each rank level you're at. Because like
the meta in Rocket League was just how to improve. That was the meta. Yeah. Like, oh, let's get better at this. And then somebody finds a new trick or something. Okay, let's learn that and then use it for ourselves. That was the meta in Rocket League, basically.
Fair enough. We also didn't cover like StarCraft and whatnot, but we don't.
About it.
No. Exactly.
It's like Halo Wars. The meta in Halo Wars now? Oh, man.
Bro, I don't play that game. I don't know what that is.
Halo Wars is dope.
Oh, like I literally just play Overwatch and time, and I played League for a long ass time. I dabbled in Dota for like a couple of hours, so I understand the character names and like the positions, but I don't understand like the specific strategies and whatnot.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing you need to know is that
like I don't know all the items.
Being versatile does not necessarily correlate with you being a good player. Like most of the top tier players, at most, usually per patch, specialize in like 4, 5, maybe 6 heroes. And like I'm just gonna do a little bit more justice to the game here because there are gaps in my knowledge for this, but I've collected my thoughts. Like Dota it's a complex game, and thus it makes it very hard to learn many heroes. I could only assume that League is in a similar boat to that because it has like almost 150 champions. But that same complexity can also make it unnecessary to learn so many heroes because you also have so many items, builds, and playstyles for most heroes that there's always going to be some way to play and make a hero work even in like the worst situations. So for example, if you're presented with the perfect Void Spirit game, but you're a way better Ember Spirit, you're going to be better off just simply playing the Ember Spirit because you understand the hero better. And this correlates directly with drafting as well, even in like TI level games. And this is what has helped OG win both TIs, is because they simply played what they prefer to play rather than what they think is the meta. And by them playing with their best at and winning the games, they essentially define what becomes meta. Like Ana single-handedly, who is one of the best carry players in the world in my opinion, single-handedly made carry IO meta. just because he enjoyed playing it in his scrims and his pubs, and he won TI with it. So tips
Easy.
for like making a good draft would be, one, to choose like 5 or so heroes that you're good with, and to learn all the matchups with these heroes. And that's how you get ahead in drafting, because you have confidence in your heroes and your ability to play against even your bad matchups. Because if you have enough experience in a matchup, you can find ways to work something out.
I'm gonna say something that's I don't know if it's controversial, but like it leads off of what Ryan just said, which is I think a point that he's getting at is that there's no real meta to say. It's just popular opinion, right? Like there's sometimes
And
there is
it
like a
goes
meta,
back
but like when it comes to ladder, do you really need to pick meta? Because you aren't playing at the highest, very highest level, right? Like
Yeah.
I sure am not. Like I'm not trying to be Overwatch League or anything like that. I'm just gonna play what I like, and it works.
Exactly.
And like I can climb using that. Like
Because
Memo's playing what he likes, it's gonna work. Like even if Hanzo falls out of meta, I'm pretty sure you pop off as Hanzo because you're mechanically better at
This-
Hanzo.
I can't speak for like Overwatch League mentality, but I know for DPC, this is what a lot of pro players apply in DPC and in TI in Dota. It's something that players assimilate pretty frequently. Because being an expert or even a master in a handful of heroes will eventually become muscle memory and instinct. And with that, you can focus on all the macro decision making rather than being distracted by all the micro decision making in game.
Yeah, I think that you can say the same about like Overwatch League because like the Overwatch League mentality is you pretty much play whatever. You still pick characters that are strong, but you don't focus on like, oh, I need to have this type of team composition. Like I need to run the new dive or whatever. But I think like that's what I wanted to say is that like for any game when it comes to ladder, you can just say fuck the meta and you just do whatever you're good at because that's honestly going to be the best for everyone in the game because that improves the quality of the game.
And in some cases, you end up defining the meta if people see that you're having success with it.
All right, so I think that's all we have covered for now. Be sure to let us know in the YouTube comment sections because we will be posting this on YouTube soon. I will be pinging Greg, obviously, to make sure it gets posted on our ITE channel. If you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe. There will be another episode soon-ish, but in the meantime, we do have that new show that we talked about at the start of the episode, which is Resports Rundown, headed by Isaac. I believe Awesome and Memo, you guys are on it?
Yeah, and then also
Yeah.
also
As well as
Eric and-
Blitz and Eric.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you guys want to do like a quick shout out to on like what you guys will be doing, like a quick summary, like a 1 or 2 line summary, what you guys will be like, what it's on.
Yeah. So we were planning the first episode to be on February 8th, so keep an eye out for that. That's subject to change along with the time, which we haven't really decided yet. But that's we were thinking the February 8th. Generally, what we're gonna be doing is that we're gonna be covering any esports news for the previous 2 weeks, because it will be every 2 weeks. But we'll be covering any news, any patch notes, and then trying to give our takes on certain esports related events when it comes to the professional scene, along with all matches, patch notes, mess changes, all of that.
So if you're interested, please be on the lookout for that. There'll be their very first episode soon. Obviously, it's good, because we don't want to burn people out with Maldcast, and we do want to have like our decent amount of break to next episode. That's what we're going to be doing. Is that we're going to have the Maldcast and Resports Rundown the following week, so you guys don't have a content drought. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope everybody has a good day, good night. Thank you to Memo for coming on as a guest host, coming up clutch because Greg was too tired to actually do any kind of hosting. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a good night.
All right, thank you.